Hey, this is Garland Bilbo. We just had another great service. We talked out of Luke chapter 9, verses 49 through verse 55. Jesus was making himself ready to go to the cross. The word says that he set his face straight for Jerusalem. I want to challenge you today that whatever your goals are, whatever your dreams are, set your face. Get focused on what God has for you and don't allow anybody to interfere with where you're going. You know, it's interesting how many times we start looking at everything else that's going on around us and we lose our focus. We have to be intentional with everything that we do to become successful. So I challenge you today to be intentional, to focus, discipline yourself for what God has for you. We're about to go into the message here, and I believe it's going to bless you. I pray that God's hand will be upon you and help strengthen you for the days ahead. Not that days ahead are going to be bad, but everybody has storms that come into their life. But if you stay focused and everything you do is intentional, you'll get your way through every storm. Don't focus on the storm. Have an encounter with God and allow Him to do a great work in your life.
And it came to pass when the time was come that he should be received up, he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem. He steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem. He steadfastly set his face. I want you to get that. He set his face. He had a purpose. And there was a destiny for him. And the disciples, and we're going to see in just a moment, the disciples begin to see a change take place in his face. You ever get to talking to somebody and you know you've lost them in your conversation, and their whole face now changes, and now they're focused on something different. It wasn't that what you had to say was not important. It was that something happened in their mind, in their heart, and they changed their position, and now they're focused on where they're going. They're not interested anymore to hear what you're having to say. Quit flapping your lips because you've already lost them. Yeah. They have set their face. So Jesus now has set his face on Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem had threats out for Christ. There was, for the lack of better words, there was a bounty. There was a bounty set out for Christ. They wanted to kill him. And the disciples knew that. Jesus knew that. But Jesus set his face. Now, a person that sets their face is not going to worry about the threats. They're not going to worry about the odds that's against them. They're not going to worry about, when you set your face, when you have disciplined yourself all your life for this moment. This is what Jesus has done now. He has now walked from miracles and messages to the place that he set his face, because he's coming to a place for him to be lifted up. He's about to give up the ghost. He's about to die in the natural, but yet at the same time, he knows that he's going to rise again. And it came to pass, when the time was come that he should be received up, he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem, and sent messengers before his face, and they went and entered in a village in Samaria of the Samaritans to make ready for him. And they did not receive him, because his face was as though he would go to Jerusalem. This is interesting, because this, before Golgotha, before the beatings, before Gethsemane, before all of the things and events that took place in Christ's life that we are very grateful that he went through, before the shedding of the blood, before them piercing his side and nailing him to the tree, and all the things that he endured. This is telling us the condition that he began to bring forth in his life in order to endure what he was about to face. And when his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, Lord, wilt thou that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, even as Elias did? But he turned and rebuked them and said, Ye know not what manner of spirit ye are of. For the Son of Man is not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went to another village. And it came to pass that as they went in the way, a certain man said unto him, Lord, I will follow thee whithersoever thou goest. And Jesus said unto him, foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath nowhere to lay his head. And he said unto another, follow me. But he said, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. And Jesus responds and says, let the dead bury the dead. In this story here, we're finding the whole thing being set up right here in Luke chapter 9 of how Jesus is about to handle all the things that have come his way, because it says he set his face towards Jerusalem. And he didn't allow anything to interfere. Not even the closest ones to him could interfere and talk him out of going to Jerusalem. The reality of it is we have a lot of influences in our life, and if we're not watching, we can allow things, people, suggestions to talk us out and get us off focus. Jesus was focused. Somebody say he was focused. If you're not focused on where you're going, you'll be distracted by everything that comes around. If you're focused and totally focused, you will not see other things come into the room, because you're not going to allow anything to impair where you're going. Right. This is where Jesus was. Jesus is being entertained by the disciples, and they said, hey, let us call fire down. He says, I don't think that's going to be the right thing to do. I don't believe it. What spirit are you of, guys? Because I've not come to destroy men, but I've come to save them. Jesus had a purpose, and he knew where he was going. Now, I want to show you something here, because this is how the church gets. There are four phases of Christ's life. The first phase of his life was his miracles. Miracles are great. They're wonderful. I love to see miracles. I think they're fabulous, because what happens in a miracle, it changes people's understanding of who God really is, or their perception of who God is. When they see somebody healed, or they're healed themselves, then they now know that there is a God. Nobody else could do that. Doctors couldn't heal that. Doctors couldn't do anything with that, but God came down, touched their life. And so he began to perform miracles in the first phase of his life. The second phase was the message. He gathered his disciples around and he gave them a message. He began to teach them, and he began to teach the people. And if the people received and the people heard, they saw the miraculous power. They heard the words of Christ. And then if the disciples didn't understand what he was saying to them, because he was speaking to them in parables, when they got Jesus alone, Jesus began to teach them the message that he was sharing with the world, or sharing with the people that come to hear, and began to give them different examples. He had a message. Messages and miracles are not for us to stop at. A miracle is to let us know that God's alive. A message is to gather us in a place that causes such change in our emotions that we are so willing to follow after him. Messages are designed to bring change in our life. And I believe that Jesus was so focused on where he was going that he became very intentional. If there's no focus, or if there is wrong focus in my life, I can miss what God has for me. You can have focus, but you can have wrong focus. So there's four areas here, four stages that his ministry went through. First one was the miracles. He started off with his first miracle, turning the water into wine. The second is the message. He began to speak a message to the people. He began to speak about the gospel of the kingdom. He taught people. He instructed people. He brought the word to people. And after that he ministered to people, after he performed miracles, and after he gave message, what did we find him do? We find him in a quiet place with his Father. Are you catching me here? So the third place was he had a moment with his Father. Now let me show you something here, because Jesus' life is directing us from miracles to the message, and then he's directing us to the moment. You can have miracles and you can have messages, but you're not getting in the right place until you have a moment with God, until you have an encounter with God. Now hear what I'm saying here. We can come to church and we can feel the presence of God, and that's great and that's wonderful. I'm not talking about a corporate experience, because there's a lot of people that get under the corporate experience and they still don't have an experience with God. They just had a brush by moment. An angel's wing came by and you felt just a little bit of wind and you were, what was that? Well, you know, and we keep going on the same way we've been going. But what I'm talking about is a moment with God in your car, a moment with God in your shower, a moment with God in your living room, a moment with God in your backyard. Just a moment. That's all. Just a moment with him. And Jesus, when he ministered to the people after performing miracles and after delivering a message, he had to have a moment with his Father. And you find him going to the high places of having a moment with him. But when he comes out of that moment, he now goes right back into the miracles and to the messages. But you never find him without having a moment with God. And I believe this, that there are many people that come to church for a message. There are many people that come to church to see the gifts in operation. But I'm telling you, the greatest thing is to have a moment with God by himself, all by yourself, without having any music on, without having a dance on. But all of a sudden, the presence of God comes into your room, comes into your kitchen, comes into your living room, and you put your shout on right there without any music on. That's a moment with God. We got to have a moment with him. Why? Because without the moment with God, we will never, ever be able to go into our mission. Our mission, which is, I think, the most important part of us living. What is your mission? What has it been designed to do? What is it that you've gone through that you have to touch somebody else's life? Make sense here? So we have to have a moment with God in order to get some clarity about our mission. Look at this. We've got children's church workers right in there right now that's not worried about the message. They're not worried about miracles. What they're worried about is the mission. The mission is to raise up children that when they're older, they won't depart from the gospel that's been taught to them. So I appreciate all of our teachers that are going out of their way to go in and teach the children. You know what? There are other things that happen in church that are beyond just preaching. Right. Yeah. All the people that came here early, I don't know what time they got here, but they were here an hour and a half, 2 hours early, setting up the camera, setting up the audio, setting up the speakers, setting up the stuff here. Why? They're really not worried about so much the message or the miracles. What they have come encounter with is a moment with God, and the moment with God now brings them to understanding that they've got a mission to make this thing work so that other people that are coming in can hear the message and can see the miracles and now have an encounter with God and have a moment with him so they can reproduce after their own kind. But the word tells us that the harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few. So what it tells us that many people want to see the miracle. They want to hear the message, but they're not willing to take the next step to have an encounter with God, a moment by themselves with God, to understand what their mission is. Is this making sense? So what happens is, if we don't understand the mission and what God has placed in our hand as talents and ability, we're not going to give. We're not going to do. And as a result, we're not going to have. We get so focused on the things that are around us that we are getting distracted from the focus before us. You cannot focus on everything. You have to focus on the thing. I can have a miracle, but am I ready for that miracle to receive? Am I ready to receive that miracle? Because if I'm not ready to receive that miracle, I'm going to find myself, after I get that advancement, after I get that bonus, after I get that raise, that I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to find a pair of shoes that I think's pretty, that I'm not intentional with, and I'll have more shoes in my closet than I have outfits to go with those shoes. So what I end up doing is spending and why would God want to bless people that are not ready to receive or even acting the part? Miracles are great. Messages are wonderful. But the transition from miracles and messages, the next step is having a moment with God. There's many people in church don't know what their mission is, because they're so interested in the message, or they're interested in the miracle, but they never have an encounter with God by themselves. And because they never have an encounter with God by themselves, because they don't discipline themselves for the encounter, then they have to make people believe they had an encounter. Miracles, messages, moments, and a mission. What is your mission? Because in all reality, until you get a hold of your mission, you'll never be fulfilled, and you'll never set your face for the direction you need to go in. You'll always be looking at everything else around you instead of where you need to go.